Upai means Shravana Adi, devotional service beginning with hearing. Bhakti, devotional service. Krishna, the Supreme Lord. Praptira, to approach Him. Sahaya, means. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. It is only by devotional service, beginning with hearing, that one can approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the only means to approach Him. Please repeat. It is only by devotional service, beginning with hearing, that one can approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the only means to approach Him. Purport. Mayavadi philosophers are satisfied simply to understand Brahman to be the sum total of knowledge. But Vaishnava philosophers not only know in detail about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but also know how to approach Him directly. The method for this is described by Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu as 9 kinds of devotional service, beginning with hearing. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam Padasevanam, Archanam Bandhanam Dasyam Sakyam Atmanivedanam. Bhagavatam 7.5.23. The 9 kinds of devotional service are hearing about Krishna, chanting about Him, remembering Him, offering service to His lotus feet, offering Him worship in the temple, offering prayers to Him, working as His servant, making friendship with Him, and unreservedly surrendering to Him. One can directly approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply by executing these 9 kinds of devotional service, of which hearing about the Lord is the most important. Shravan Adi. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has very favourably stressed the importance of this process of hearing. According to his method, if people are simply given a chance to hear about Krishna, certainly they will gradually develop their dormant awareness or love of Godhead. Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Karaye Uday. Caitanya Caritamrita Adi-lila 22.107. Love of God is dormant in everyone, and if one is given a chance to hear about the Lord, certainly that love develops. Our Krishna consciousness movement acts on this principle. We simply give people the chance to hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and give them prasadam to eat. And the actual result is that all over the world, people are responding to this process and becoming pure devotees of Lord Krishna. We have opened hundreds of centers all over the world just to give people in general a chance to hear about Krishna and accept Krishna's prasadam. These 2 processes can be accepted by anyone, even a child. It doesn't matter whether one is poor or rich, learned or foolish, black or white, old or still a child. Anyone who simply hears about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and takes prasadam is certainly elevated to the transcendental position of devotional service. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, in the previous verse leading up to this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu makes the point to the Mayavadi philosophers that if you simply accept the impersonal feature, then you deny the energies. You only acknowledge the energies that you perceive as important to you. So the Mayavadi philosophers, they're very interested in the liberation, in getting free from suffering. This is their focus. And they simply focus on those energies of the Lord, the Brahman energies. But they deny the personality of the Lord. They say the absolute truth doesn't have personality. It's just an impersonal thing. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explaining that if you deny the personality, then you don't acknowledge all of the energies. So for example, if you're a businessman and you're trying to do business with somebody who you know is a very rich man, and if you simply focus on their impersonal energy, their wealth, their money, and you simply focus on that, and you don't acknowledge that he's a person, then you don't have the complete relationship with that person, with that businessman. You're simply focusing on what you are trying to achieve. So when you do this type of thing to the Supreme Lord, whether you're after material enjoyment or whether you're after liberation from matter, the same thing goes, the same principle is there, that you're actually denying the personality of the person, in this case the Supreme Person. And we can see even in the mundane example that if you accept the totality of the person, that they have a personality, they're a person, they have different things they like and dislike, and they're also very rich as well. They have the impersonal energies of their wealth and their company and so forth. If one takes in totality of the person, then the impersonal, the energy is included in that. And you can see even practically, if you read about people who are successful in business, they always talk about this. They say, deal with the person. Because when you deal with the personal aspect, you're dealing with all of their energies included in that. The personal includes the impersonal, but the impersonal doesn't include the personal. If you just focus on trying to get the money out of the guy, just a business dealing, then you won't succeed as much as somebody who takes the totality that yes, this person has this impersonal energy, at the same time they're a person. What do they like? What do they not like? What's their particular mood? What's their who are they as a person? So in the same way, with the Supreme Lord, if you take this kind of attitude, or this, as Lord Chaitanya says, you cannot understand the whole truth by just only accepting half the truth, what he says in the previous verses. So once you accept that there is a personal aspect of any person, whether it be a businessman or anyone, any person that's very, a big person, including the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then there's a process of how to approach them. And as Prabhupada is saying here, that the Vaishnava Acharyas, they not only know that the Supreme has a personality, but they also know the process of how to approach the Supreme. And this is the process that first you have to hear about the person. You have to understand, what do they like, what do they not like. Like if in the example, keep the example going of the businessman, if you're trying to do business with someone that's the head of some huge, successful, very powerful organization, very wealthy, then if you want to connect with that person, you have to ask people that know them already. Oh, what do they like? What do they not like? What's the mood? People that read books about, what's the way they like to deal, all these kind of things. So first of all, you have to hear. To establish a relationship with someone, you first of all have to hear about them. So as Prabhupada is saying here, the process of devotional service is dependent, and it all begins from this point of hearing. You have to hear about Krishna, the Supreme Lord. If you don't hear about him, there'll be no desire. But by hearing about him, the more and more, then naturally when you hear about something, then you tell about someone, oh, there's an amazing person, And you see it all the time in the world. Somebody, hears, there's this amazing, some of my kids are like a particular singer or a particular actor or something. Oh, did you hear about them? Oh, they did this, they did that. So naturally you hear about somebody great, then you want to talk about it. You want to tell people about it. And then naturally you remember. So in the same way, when we hear about Krishna, we hear about him, how great he is and how incredible he is and all these different opulences. Then naturally we want to tell people, oh, do you hear, this is Krishna, he does that. You naturally have a desire. Do you want to share that? When people are glorifying some mundane personality, say, yeah, but have you heard about Krishna? You think he's amazing. This is this person. And this is his book. This is what he said. And naturally you want to say. And that's why Prabhupada said, preaching to sharing is so important. Because when you hear and then you share, when you speak about what you've heard, then the remembrance comes very well. And actually Srila Prabhupada, mentioned that. We know that many times. He said, yes, I'm speaking very nicely because I heard from my spiritual master very nicely. Srila Prabhupada mentioned that. So this point of hearing, we know on that, you probably know the story, but there's one pastime with Srila Prabhupada where he was on a parikram with his guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, and there was an option that, tonight there's going to be 2 programs. It was announced, a big parikram, in going through the holy places. And it was announced that tonight there'll be one option to go to this temple, and it was a very kind of, interesting temple, and, it was something people wanted to go and see the temple and see the different activities going on. Or at the same time, Guru Maharaj will be giving a class. And Srila Prabhupada tells a story that many of the devotees, and if I remember correctly, the majority actually wanted to go to the temple and see things, but Prabhupada stayed back to hear. And actually Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, he marked Srila Prabhupada. He said he likes to hear. He likes to hear about Krishna. And Prabhupada established his whole movement. He established the movement of Bhaktisiddhanta, or Bhakti Vinod, of 6 Goswamis, of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Radha Krishna. He established his branch of that movement on this principle of hearing. As he says here, literally, he says we've established hundreds of centers around the world so that people can have a chance to hear about Krishna and then also take prasadam. So this is the open secret Prabhupada's giving, that if you hear very nicely and then if you repeat it, what you've heard, to somebody else, then the remembrance will come. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. Just like we can see in the pastimes of Krishna himself, that Rukmini Devi, his principal queen from Dwarka, embodied this principle, that she had never met Krishna, she'd never seen him, but she'd heard about him. And by hearing about Krishna from different sages that were traveling through her father's kingdom, she developed an intense desire, an intense affection and desire and love for Krishna, simply by hearing about his glories. So in the same way, we can take advantage of this. And Prabhupada says sometimes, Prabhupada says this here, this is the only way, isn't it? I can't find it now, but I just read it a second ago, that Prabhupada said this. Oh, it's in the verse, right? Yeah, correct. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Boo. Yes, it's right there in the verse that this is the only way. There's no other way to approach Krishna than by hearing about him. It all begins from hearing. So we are, very fortunate in this age that actually we have, so many devices and abilities of how we can hear about Krishna. Srila Prabhupada came at an incredible time when not only was there international travel, for only pretty much the decade before that, or in that decade, in the 60s, was when international travel just became, totally normal. By planes, people could fly around. It was only probably for the 10 years before that or so. And it was only for, only really in that decade that it became very common for people to have portable audio devices and portable video devices that weren't these huge cameras or these huge things. So Prabhupada, by Krishna's arrangement, Srila Prabhupada came at a time when his disciples were able to record in audio and video everything, not everything, but so much of his pastimes and so many things that he did. And we can literally live in that sound vibration of Srila Prabhupada, of what he's giving, what he's saying. Of course, we have the rest of our life, according to our Varna and our ashram, we have different duties and we have to hear this and hear that. But there is so many chances nowadays. If we're on a train, if we're going to work or we're going to school every day in a train for an hour there and back, we can be hearing. There's so many beautiful recitations now of Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavatam and Caitanya Caritamrita that different devotees have given audio books. There's so much. There's just so much that really, there's no excuse for us not to be absorbed and thinking in terms of Prabhupada's, worldview. This is the worldview of a pure devotee acting in the world. And so many, misgivings that we may have, or that may come up, or that we may hear, are just, totally overcome, or totally, we totally don't become victim to so many doubts and so many things if we just, absorb in hearing Krishna consciousness from Srila Prabhupada. And this is the beauty. It's said that, what's that verse in Mahabharata, that, every sage has a different opinion. The Shastras give different injunctions, but the real Mahajana Yena Gata Sabanta, the real secret of spiritual advancement is hidden in the heart of a pure devotee. Because naturally, we're coming out of material life, we have different impersonal conceptions, we have different material conceptions, that enjoyment means taking the position of the enjoyer rather than being the enjoyed, being the spiritual potency of the Lord, becoming the energy of the Lord. All of these ideas are coming from material life, and if we don't have the example of a pure devotee who's living and acting in the world and talking and moving around in the world, if we don't have that example, it's very difficult to understand what is devotional service. Very difficult to understand how to practice devotional service. Practically impossible. How can we understand it? Lord Chaitanya himself came, that Krishna himself came as Lord Chaitanya to make it easier to show how to act in devotional service in Kali Yuga. Because we can't really relate to Krishna having, the big king going on chariots and throwing astras at each other, and sort of like, we can't really relate to that. It's from a different age. But when Lord Chaitanya came, he dealt with other cultures. He dealt with the followers of Muhammad who were there in India at the time, who were eating meat and drinking, and he dealt with them, and you can see how he interacted with all the different varieties of people and different cultures. We can see that, and at the same time progress in devotional service. So this Caitanya Caritamrita, it really is, it's the essence of the essence. If we say that, Srimad Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit of devotional service, of the tree of the Vedic knowledge, Srimad Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit, then Caitanya Caritamrita is really like the essence of that fruit. It's like in Gujarat they have a preparation, they call it Aam Ras. Aam means mango in Hindi, Gujarati. And rasa means like the taste, the juice of it. So this ras is just, you take all of the stuff out of the mango, you take the skin out, you take the seed out, you take it, and you just mash up just that pure fleshy fruit. So that's like, if Srimad Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit, the mango, then Caitanya is like that mango with everything extraneous taken out and just the absolute essence of that given to us in Kali Yuga to understand. The pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, everything, you know, everything is there. Everything is there. But we have to take advantage of hearing. We have to hear about it. We have to hear. If we don't hear, we'll be hearing so many things. We'll be hearing so many other things. And practically speaking, we're going to hear so many things. Wherever, you know, you just walk down the street and there'll be some TV showing the news, the latest thing, this happened, that happened. So many other things will come in, you know, unless we go to the mountains. But that's not practical in Kali Yuga. We have to interact with the world. There will be things. You know, you could try to go to the forest now, and they'd probably come and bulldoze it down. We have to interact. So we have to take very strong measures. There's very strong measures of hearing about materialistic sound vibrations from every place it's coming. So we have to take very strong measures. Use that same facilities that are given for hearing. It's in our homes, it's in our very rooms. All the devices that we have video, have audio. We can hear. You know, we have to hear, of course, we have to hear. We have to do our occupation for a doctor or an engineer, or if whatever we're working as, we have to interact and we have to understand the field. We can't be blind. But we can, whenever possible, be hearing. And as Prabhupada said, and as Prahlad Maharaj is saying in that verse, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, everything comes from hearing. If we focus on the hearing, if we make that as a foundation of our life, if we're feeling, just like Ramai Swami often says, I've heard him say in the class many times, we're chanting, and if we're struggling, we're feeling a bit down, we chant more. We do more chanting. So in the same way, you know, if we feel we're struggling a bit in Krishna consciousness, we're not getting that mercy, we're getting affected by the material modes, we need to hear more. We need to chant more, and we need to hear more, add more hearing into it. It's actually a vibration. It's actually a vibration that actually clears away all of the iniquities of our life, of our mind. What is that? Kali doshanadera janasti yekamad guna kirtanadeva krishnasya mukta sangha paramraja. There's an ocean of Kali, but if we're hearing about Krishna, we can overcome it. There's an interesting conversation, and I'd strongly encourage everyone also to really study the conversations of Srila Prabhupada. Of course, there is a discussion actually in the conversations where Prabhupada discouraged too much of, you know, studying conversations, because he said everything's in my books. So I think, you know, we have to take that on. Of course, Srila Prabhupada's followers have mercifully given us the opportunity to read his conversations, but we have to, in that light of Prabhupada's own comment that everything's in my books, that we have to understand it always in light of the book. Not that, you know, we have some idea, and here it is in one obscure conversation somewhere Prabhupada said that. Not like that, but by studying Prabhupada's conversations, there's so many little things that just naturally come out of him, as a pure devotee. And there's one conversation where Prabhupada, he was just commenting on this verse, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu by Prahlad Maharaj. And he said in that conversation that yes, the first three, they're the Bhagavad Marg, and the rest, they are all Pancharatrika. So it's an interesting insight, a comment that these three, so we just to you know, quickly just describe what is the Bhagavad Marg and the Pancharatrika Marg. It's a little bit technical, but basically Bhagavan means Krishna, just like we have Bhagavad Gita. Gita means song. Bhagavad Gita is the song of Bhagavan, God, the Lord himself. And then Pancharatra means all of the injunctions of how to practically apply, how to practically worship Krishna in the world. So all the regulations of deity worship, rising early, regulated devotional service. These things are Pancharatra. So the Bhagavat is direct. You are directly connecting with Krishna by hearing about him, by speaking about him, and by remembering him. We're directly. And Pancharatra is more indirect. You know, how you wake up, and those things are directly connected to Krishna later. So it's interesting that Prabhupada is making that, it's just a comment that he made, that if you think about it, that these three are so central. They are really the core of the Bhagavat Marg, is hearing about Krishna. Right? Hearing about Krishna, telling people about Krishna, and then remembering deeply within oneself. This is the Bhagavat Marg. So Prabhupada quotes also in this verse, this very famous verse from Adi-lila 22:107, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunai Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Karayo Udai. And this verse means, Nitya Siddha, Nitya means eternally, Siddha means perfected. Nitya Siddha, Krishna Prema, Prema means love of God. Krishna Prema, Sadhya from another place, Kabu can be attained, Nai, not. But Shravanadi, the same thing by hearing and chanting. Shuddha, purify, Chitte, the heart. Karaya does, Udai, awaken. So this point is given in the Vaishnava teachings that, Krishna consciousness is not something that we learn per se. It's not an extraneous skill that we take on. And sometimes it feels like that when we've been absorbed in material life and struggling with trying to achieve so many things. Sometimes it feels like that when we try to chant Hare Krishna, we try to sit and hear, we feel like, oh, this is very, in the beginning it feels very sort of unnatural, it feels wrong. To the material mind and consciousness, it is unnatural in that sense. We've been absorbed in material consciousness, thinking in a material way. So when we hear the spiritual sound vibration, it's kind of like different, jarring. And we might think, oh yeah, I have to learn this, I have to learn that. But the Acharyas are explaining that yes, you have to learn the techniques, you have to learn how to deal with devotees, different levels, you have to learn the science of devotional service. But at the heart of it, you're reawakening something that's already within you. You already love God, but it's dormant. You have love of God, but it's dormant. Just like a tree, a seed of a tree. Sometimes in the desert it might only rain every 10 years or something. So the seeds are lying there, but they're dormant. So that seed of devotional service is within us. It's there. Brahmanda Brahmate Kona Bhagavan Jiva. Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Beach. That seed is there. It's also said, a slightly different point, that sometimes the Guru gives that or he activates that seed. But that seed of love of God is there, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema. But by hearing and chanting, when the rains come in the desert, the rain falls and then the seed fructifies, the seed grows. So in the same way, the seed of love of God, it's within us, but it's just dormant. And the rain to make that seed grow is hearing and chanting. Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte. By hearing and chanting, the heart becomes purified. And that seed of love of God, that awakens. But it's not something where we have to get from somewhere else. It's actually within us. But what we have to get from somewhere else is the process of how to awaken it. The process of how not to get recontaminated with the material world. Ishopanishad verse 11 says these two have to go on vidyams cha avidyams chayat. We have to cultivate that love of God, that vidya, that knowledge of spirit. At the same time we have to have the knowledge of how the material world's working. We have to learn that from the spiritual master. I remember when I took the Brahman Diksha, the initiation of chanting the Gayatri mantras, my spiritual master wrote on a board, and he said there's material, material bondage here, and there's liberation here. And he drew a circle, and he said this mantra, this Gayatri mantras, they help you to get liberated. But once you're liberated, they're not needed, they're not necessary. Just like Banu Maharaj was explaining in a class the other day, that very nice example that to understand what is the pure Bhagavat Marg, or the Raganuga Bhakti, when that comes to that level, we hear about it that the advanced devotees, they actually, the rules and regulations don't become important. They can actually become an impediment to them. Just like if somebody is, has attained the highest level of Krishna Prema and is actually like the six Goswamis and like these very, very, exalted Vaishnavas that are actually entering into the Lila of Krishna. And they may be, in their meditation, they're actually in the spiritual world serving Krishna, and then the time comes for them to chant Gayatri. So for them to follow that rule and regulation of chanting Gayatri at a regulated time actually hinders their devotional service. So at that time they may not follow that. So in this way, the has to be the balance there, that Krishna Prema is in the heart, but while one is conditioned, one has to learn how to get free from the conditioning. And by getting free from the conditioning, the more one is getting free from the conditioning, in other words, loving matter or taking that position of the control of matter, the more one gets free from that, the more one can actually embrace and love God. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma na kankchati na sochati sama saveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labhate param. Krishna says that when you get free from these modes, then you can actually love Him. So Nityasiddha Krishna Prema is that love of God is in the heart. It's not something we get from somewhere else. This is the love of God, this is the Bhagavat Marg. But we have to learn the Pancharatra. We have to learn how to deal with the avidya. We have to learn how to, what is the science of liberation, of getting free from the prison house of the material world. So just to finish up, Prabhupada said these two processes can be accepted by anyone, even a child, and it doesn't matter whether one is poor or rich, learned or foolish, black or white, old or still a child. Anyone who simply hears about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and takes prasadam is certainly elevated to the transcendental position of devotional service. Sometimes we hear that Srila Prabhupada used this idea of unity and diversity, that there's unity within the Krishna consciousness movement, but there's diversity among the members. There's different, obviously, statuses of life. There's different abilities and so many different things. But there is a unity, and the unity. This is actually the platform of unity of devotees. The platform of unity is actually hearing about Krishna, because we all are pure spirit souls. We all are trying to love Krishna, and when we hear about Krishna, this is the platform of unity. And when we have that platform of unity, the diversity is not so important. Oh, you want to serve Krishna in this way? You want to serve Krishna in that way? It's like Kridananda Maharaj was telling a story I was hearing the other day, and how he was a new sannyasi, and he was the head of the preaching in the whole of South America, the whole continent, and he came and Prabhupada was glorifying his activities and saying it's so wonderful what you're doing. And then he was feeling very good, and he came back that afternoon hoping for some more validation of what he was doing, and he said that Prabhupada basically ignored him, and all of the other big devotees who were in the room, and was pointing out, one Vaishnava who was doing the flower arrangement, and said, "This is real devotional service. This is real bhakti." And Hridayananda Maharaj makes a point that at that point in time, that Vaishnava was more Krishna conscious than he was, because she was simply thinking about how to serve Krishna and how to serve a spiritual master nicely, without any motivation, just to please Krishna and Guru and Krishna. And he was thinking, how I can, have more of this sort of acknowledgement of, my own activities. So it doesn't matter what the diversity is and what service people want to do in the movement if the unity is there, and that the platform of unity is hearing about Krishna. That's what we have in common. And it's very, I feel very sad when sometimes I see on through the computer media, different social channels, that devotees focus on platforms that are not platforms of unity, that are platforms of disunity, and it's very lamentable. And if we understand in a philosophical sense that Krishna consciousness or Vaishnavism is simultaneously the most progressive philosophy, and it's also the most conservative philosophy at the same time. So politics is basically, if you look around the world, there's generally two parties, and one of them are progressive, that we need to change this and be more egalitarian and include people and take away these old draconian laws and progress. There's the progressives, and then there's the conservatives. No, we have to conserve the religious principles, we have to conserve the traditions. So these two sides are there in every political system. We can see the two main parties, one is progressive and one is conservative. But as devotees, we don't wholeheartedly give our allegiance to either one, because Krishna consciousness is simultaneously the most progressive thing. It's the most progressive because whatever ism, whatever idea of philosophy that we have, Krishna consciousness is beyond that. It's not only helping all the people, all the humans of the world, it's helping every living entity. It's not only getting free from this, solving this problem of the world and moving on, it's solving all the problems of the world. It is there's nothing more progressive than Krishna consciousness as a philosophy. We know so many devotees gave up everything to take Krishna consciousness. At the same time, Krishna consciousness is the most conservative philosophy, because it's based on principles that never change. Because they are the principles of how the living entity interacts with the material nature and how the living entity attains his eternal position. These principles never change. So even conservative philosophies and parties, they can change, but Krishna consciousness never changes. Krishna makes this point to Arjuna. Arjuna says, "Oh, why? When are you hearing this?" And Krishna says, "Well, I spoke this to the sun god like 100 million something years ago." He said, so it doesn't change. So Krishna consciousness is the most progressive and it's the most conservative. And some devotees will sort of resonate with one side or another when that's manifested in the political, in the social sphere, and say, no, we should be conservative because that Krishna consciousness. I know we should be progressive because Krishna consciousness is progressive. Yes, it is. It's both of those things, But that's the platform of disunity. That's the platform of disunity, because Krishna consciousness is all of that. But Krishna consciousness is Krishna consciousness. It's being conscious of Krishna, the Supreme Lord. And that's the platform of unity. And you can, if you see the world, at least for me, I have to say, there's no other worldview that makes sense. There's no other worldview that encompasses everything, that includes everything and explains everything. So, we don't need to go down into the ism of this and that. We can be, as devotees, we will be the most progressive and we'll be the most conservative in a good way. And this is the platform of unity. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We've got a few minutes for any comment or question. If there's any comment or question. Shanti Prayan Prabhu. There's the microphone there.
In unity, there's a lot of different points you made, and the quality of reading. Can you say something about academic integrity?
Academic integrity?
Yeah, in regard to approaching the scriptures.
I can try, but what exactly do you mean by academic integrity?
Not speculating on what you're reading, or as you were saying, you find something that will verify your theory. You're actually reading to find what is actually there, not to impose yours.
Yeah, I would say that it's not really a problem for ourselves, because the fact is we all do have different conditioning and we all see the world in different ways, and we need to be inspired in Krishna consciousness, and naturally I think that happens. I know for myself, when I read that verse, what's that verse? It is lust only, kamesha krodesha raja guna samudva, and in the purport Prabhupada says that this lust is actually love of God, which is perverted through the material modes of nature. And I was just, oh my God, thank you. Now I understand. Like, that resonated so much with me, because, whatever is my nature, I don't like that idea of just cut it off, just renounce it all. Like, it just doesn't gel with me. But that's me. And so when I could see, I get it. This material world and all the lust and all the desires and everything, that's the energy of that is love of God. Just like that blue color there, the energy of that is the sun. Now the reason it's blue is due to that glass, but the energy itself is the sun behind that. So the reason we have lust is due to our blue glass, our imperfection, but that energy, why we find it so important, why we're striving for things, because that's love of God in a perverted form, and therefore it gives a perverted effect on us. Anyway, that's a detail. So to me that meant a lot. Now, if we find something, or we're looking for something, everyone has their truth. Everyone has the way they look, and if we can find that in the scripture and say, oh my God, Lord Chaitanya actually said that same thing I've been thinking about. That's fantastic. That's good. I would say where it's, if we're accepting what he says, as you say, if we're accepting what he says. The problem comes if we then try to push that onto everybody else, right? Because they're different. So that then becomes a problem if we say everyone should be like that. Like if I say everyone should think, no, some people, they have the moods just, no, it's not, it's Maya. That's Maya. Okay, yeah, it is Maya. Okay. And they make spiritual progress, and they preach, and they make other people devotees, by not really thinking in that way that, it's Krishna's energy. They think, no, just black and white, it's Maya. And that's okay. And if I try to say to them, think about it in this way, try to find your insight, try to gel how the scriptures really, explain the world to you, because that's what we're looking for. We're trying to get that the scriptures explain the world. And they're not going to explain the world if we have a total materialistic mindset that, I'm the Lord and I should control everything. Obviously, they're not going to. So to what degree? But as we advance, we'll understand, So and in a more technical point, in answer to your question, there's also And I think Jayadvaita Maharaj, covers this very well, that there's different levels of evidence. And I think we talked about that in the class, where there was a comment that Prabhupada said, these three are Bhagavat Marg, the rest are Pancharatra. It's an interesting comment, but it's not something Prabhupada, put into purports and wrote pages and pages about it as a major thing. Okay, it's an insight from pure devotee. Interesting. But it's not like, the second chapter of Bhagavatam, Divinity and Divine Service, that he gives pages of purports and this is the thing. Sarve Pumsam Parodama. It's not like that. It's not a foundational thing. So obviously, yeah.
Which three were Bhagavat Marg and which were Bhagavat?
The first three, like hearing, chanting and remembering. Yeah. Yeah, because that's direct. But obviously Bhagavat pervades them all. Offering prayers is directly, you're offering prayers. But, like I said, I just find it interesting. It's an interesting comment. Prabhupada said it. It's interesting to think that, because Shastra Chakshu is our, goal, really. Krishna consciousness is our goal. But in terms of the material world, the more we can see things in terms of the Shastra, the better it is for us. If our worldview is of modern psychology, or our worldview is of modern, whatever, anything really, that's not the Shastra. Modern, ancient, doesn't matter. But if our foundational worldview is, or what some person of our relative told us when we were young, and we just accept that and no, that's right and that's wrong. That's not progressive. We're meant to see things through the Shastra, and Shastra lets us break things up in so many different ways. Bhagavat Pancharatra is one way, Vidya, Avidya, in Ishopanishad verse 11. There's just so many ways to think about things. And at least for me, I like to have all those different ways, because it just fires off different scriptures. When I see something and I see, oh yeah, that's right, Krishna said that. Oh, that's right, oh yeah, Prabhupada said that. It's interesting, but I don't try to go around, make a philosophy out of it and say, obviously the worst or the lowest form of what I think you're talking about is where you basically say, I have a material desire, I want to fulfill this through a spiritual movement, therefore I go and find, okay, what is that in that says, yes, I can do this, and it's all bona fide. So that's where it's the principle of Brahmana is honesty and detachment. They don't have a goal in mind. Kshatriyas have a goal in mind. They're trying to manage, they're trying to maintain the thing. So when it comes to our spiritual life, we should all be Brahmanas inside. Whether we're Kshatriyas or Vaishyas, in terms of our occupation, is just our temporary situation. But when it comes to the scriptures, we should have a Brahminical attitude, which is that, I'm sorry, you're a senior devotee here. I'm not instructing you, I'm just kind of going, I'm just kind of discussing with you that. But yeah, that comes to mind too, that, that's what the Brahmanas do when it comes to scripture. So if you try to take the scripture and apply it to management and how you want to manage, then that's a Kshatriya principle, which the Kshatriyas are guided by Dharma. They're guided by Dharma of what's right and wrong and how the people should be treated. But they don't go as deep as the Brahmanas. The Brahmanas go deeply into it because they have okay, if I accept this point, this is how Brahmana thinks. If I accept this point and if I say this, I'm going to be castigated. I'm going to be told you're an idiot. I'm going to be thrown out of the kingdom. I'll have nowhere to live. I'll lose my prestige. But you know what? I'm going to say it because that's the truth. It has to be said. And there's people, even materially, all through history, that said things that made them lose their lives in so many things. But that's the principle of the Brahmanas, that they don't start with the end in mind and then try to mold the Shastra into it. They don't do that. They try to really understand what is the Shastra saying and give that spiritual, viewpoint to the rest of society. So that's something. I don't know if that's what it is. Krishna blessing.
So being detached and allowing other people to have their perspective, what is something glaringly keeping normal?
Then that comes down to Vaishnava behaviour. If they're junior to us and it's our position, if they're our child, if they're a Vaishnava who's born in our family, it's our duty to tell them. If we've taken the position as Diksha Guru, then it's our position, it's our duty to tell them. Prabhupada would say all the time, you get angry at people and say, you don't take it personally, that's my duty. I have to, that's what I have to do. But if they're either senior to us, or they're even equal or not senior, but they're not really in our close friendship, they're not someone that we have that kind of relationship with them, then we maybe, keep it distant from that. Because if we try to get into everybody else's issues and everybody else's understanding and fix it all, we're going to be here a long time, in this material world. There's going to be no end to it. So at a certain point, devotee, and you might say something little and see what's the reaction. You might say, yeah, Prabhu, I noticed how you did that. Just something little and see what the reaction. If the reaction is, oh yeah, I never thought about that. Tell me more, what are you talking about? Then you might go further. And if the reaction is, what they call in psychology gaslighting, it's like, what are you talking about? Oh, something. Oh no, sorry, I must be mistaken. Oh, no, sorry, I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, whatever, you just, okay, I'll leave it. So you can, that's just basic. Then it comes down to what we do. And when it comes down to what we do, then it comes to like relative. It's all relative. It's relative to the relationship, it's relative, but the truth may be absolute. That's the truth, but then there's so many things where Prabhupada said, and I don't want to say them in Bhagavatam class, but there's many things that Prabhupada said, this is not in Vedic culture, that doesn't happen. But for individual disciples who did those things, he said, that's okay, don't do that, stop that, but now just keep doing, get connected again in devotional service, do devotional service. He didn't say, that's not accepted, you're out, there's nothing. So the application is always relative. Time, the place, the circumstance, the people, like that. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Okay, Kantrad, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Sri Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.